Yeah, thanks, Emma. Yeah, it sounds like Duncan's hit the terrible internet gremlins, which is sod's law a little bit, isn't it? But yeah, I'm happy for us to kind of kick off and try and fill, and hopefully he'll be able to kind of sort that out and get back to us. So if you're okay, Emma, I'll just get sort of dive straight in and we'll kind of take it from there. I will try and share my screen and see if I can figure out that first hurdle. Everybody, just bear with me 1 second. If I can get that working. There we go. I don't know if I get a signal. Is that sharing? And hopefully that's kind of working and people can see that.
That's great.
Please, great. So good afternoon, everybody. I'll be trying to sort of fill in for Duncan. It was just going to do a little bit of intro to the session and kind of set the scene, I think. And obviously the intent of the session, I guess, was to give a wide variety of kind of community energy organisations and practitioners a kind of insight to some of the work that's been done around the kind of concept of local area energy planning, and to open up a bit of a discussion around the role that community energy and community energy organisations might play that kind of going forward into the future. So it's an area that the Energy Systems Catapult has been working on. So my name is Richard Halsey. I'm a director at the Energy Systems Catapult, and I've been leading a lot of our work on the development and delivery of smarter, more integrated local energy systems. And I'm also joined by my colleagues, Tim and Vili, on the session today, who are going to be supporting or involved in the kind of breakout sessions a little bit later. So Tim, Vili, I don't know if you just want to say a quick hello. Tim, perhaps first.
Hi everybody, yeah, Tim German. My role in the Energy Systems Catapult is I'm responsible for government and regulatory relationships, both devolved governments and national government, and also local government as well. And looking at the names, I think there's a few names on the call that I might recognise or might recognise me. Cheers.
Brilliant, thanks Tim. Vili, I don't know if you want a quick intro.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Vili. I work at the Market Policy and Regulation team at the Energy Systems Catapult, working cross-topic at the moment, and local energy planning is one of the areas we're looking to understand better and do a bit more research in.
Thanks, Vili. So just, I guess, a quick whistle-stop tour. So, I mean, some of you are no doubt familiar with what a kind of catapult is, but we're kind of part of a network of technology and innovation centres that are set up to basically try and accelerate the opportunities from a number of key challenge areas kind of across the economy, and also to kind of act as a bit of a bridging step between kind of academic research and kind of industrial application, and try and close that gap and help to accelerate innovation into the marketplace. As the Energy System Catapults, our focus is on the opportunity that comes from the transformation of our energy system and how we can potentially accelerate kind of innovations across the energy system into market, and also the creation of new markets that capture the clean growth opportunity. We've got about 200 people. We've got, whilst everybody is working virtually, as many of us are now, we've got kind of two main bases in the Midlands, in Birmingham and Derby. And we are kind of created or established by Innovate UK. And we have a number of key areas of activity around supporting kind of innovators, undertaking sort of research at various different levels. A particular area of focus for us is the kind of systems engineering and integration of more complex and sophisticated solutions, as well as the development of solutions that leverage digital technology. And we also have a kind of range of activity around modelling and simulation of the energy system and its various component parts. So we'll stop through this, but I guess contextually, obviously, as many of you on the call are no doubt familiar, we're expecting a pretty major transformation of our energy system. We're expecting a number of things to change quite rapidly. This is kind of just a snapshot from some work around thinking about the future of our national energy system and the potential role of hydrogen and renewable kind of electricity, which suggests or gives a direction of travel of what the future energy system might kind of look like. It is just one of many, many different scenarios that the Catapult kind of develops to explore what the future might look like. But one of the key things from doing that work and thinking about what a national energy system might look like just re-emphasizes and highlights the need to think about what that actually means in a local area, and how you translate some of that sort of strategic national thinking to practically, well, what do we do in the ground? What do local energy systems look like in different places across the country and indeed globally? And one of the key aspects to thinking about that problem from a Catapult perspective is we see the need to think about the questions in a whole system context. So what does it actually mean in terms of the generation, transmission, distribution, and ultimately end use of energy in a physical sense? What does that mean in terms of the different energy vectors, the kind of distribution networks and their interrelationships and connectivity? What does it mean in relation to how we use energy in the likes of transport? And then how do we bridge these gaps between the physical digital system and the market and policy environment that needs to wrap around that if we are going to decarbonize, particularly in those areas of significant challenge, or the areas of limited progress we've seen around major industry, but also around the issues such as decarbonizing energy in our buildings. And we see, I guess, the concepts of local area energy planning, or improving local area energy planning, as one of the potentially key building blocks for actually delivering on our net zero ambitions. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about some of the background to that work that we've done, kind of where it's kind of come from, where it's going, and also some of the thoughts on kind of what needs to happen next, as a bit of a stimulus for, I think, a series of kind of breakout discussions around what is the potential role of community energy in engaging and being part of the local area energy planning process, but also in picking up the ball and ultimately helping to deliver kind of decarbonisation projects within different places across the country. So contextually, I mean, again, I think many are probably very familiar with the kind of size of the challenge, but obviously we have a big decarbonisation commitment that's been made at the UK level, and in Scotland and Wales. And the challenges of that timescale mean we're going to have to see rapid transformation of the energy system, arguably of which we have never seen at the pace and scale that's required to get there by 2050 or before. One of the key gaps that we see, as I said earlier, is actually the recognition of what really needs to happen when and where, and how do you kind of create the mechanism by which a coordinated system level arrangements of solutions can come forward, rather than the individual single technology solutions, and how can you make sure that the technology solutions, that the projects that are brought forward collectively can work together to support the reductions of carbon emissions. And also, how can we ensure that we do that cost effectively? And one of the key findings from some of the research that we've done is that actually cost effective, the combination of different technologies and the most cost-effective solution is very dependent on the nature of the place itself, and heavily influenced by the infrastructure investments that have already been made, but also the nature of the available resources, the constraints that exist, the nature of the building stock in the place, a whole range of different factors. So, as I said at the start, some of the toughest challenges for decarbonisation are arguably those areas that we've seen less progress in terms of emissions reduction. We feel will require both local and regional coordination and action in tandem with a kind of appropriate national strategy and policy framework to support that regional and local action. Particularly around the issues of how we decarbonise our buildings, what combinations of fabric upgrades, systems and infrastructure are needed in different local areas, what is the chronology of the deployment of those solutions to ensure that they are able to deliver solutions that people want and value and that minimise disruption to local communities. What is the future of the gas network in different places, including the potential role of hydrogen or repurposing for hydrogen? How does that relate to, for example, the development of district heating, heat distribution networks, and what are the timescales for the decisions that need to be made, and how does that network infrastructure interrelate with increasingly with the power system and the measures that are taken in homes? And finally, how do we minimise this cost of transition for consumers, including the integration of both the likes of electric vehicles, low carbon and renewable energy generation, and low carbon heating systems in a kind of integrated way, and in a way at the pace and scale that's going to deliver on the targets and the commitments that we have. So what we've obviously seen, and know that many of you are very closely involved with and participating in, is a significant swell in ambition and commitment from local areas. In many cases, obviously going ahead of of the kind of national commitment of the national carbon budgets. So just a few examples here of where people, local government, local areas are striving to actually drive quicker and faster and achieve kind of carbon reduction ahead of where the national policy context is. And I guess what we feel that is fantastic to see that ambition, to see the kind of drive that's coming from local areas. But what it seems is really important is then actually connecting that ambition with a definition and understanding of what actually does that mean in different local areas. What's the activity that needs to come forward? What needs to happen in the near term? What requires innovation? What requires research to be able to define what needs to happen? What are things that requires deployment projects being developed to allow us to get on because we've got confidence that it's the right thing to do and it's needed. So the concept of local area energy planning was developed by the Catapult as a mean of kind of bringing together an understanding of how a local energy system kind of works today, and then thinking about how that might evolve and change in support of our decarbonisation goals. That was kind of founded in a range of research that was done that found that each local area across the country is very different, as I said. Its people, its geography, its building stock, its energy networks, but also its ambitions and priorities and its politics. Local energy planning potentially can benefit from what is an increasingly open and accessible data environment as we see more and more data becoming available from different actors across the energy sector. That provides the foundation for building a much more sophisticated and evidence-based understanding of the energy system that allows us to explore how future solutions might work together, and also to debunk potentially some of the myths around the benefits and also the disbenefits of certain solutions and certain technologies as well, and to be able to explore that in an open and transparent way with different stakeholders. And the development of a shared plan allows, we feel potentially allows a range of different actions and decisions to be made in coordination in a slightly more joined up way than it has been in the past. That can ensure that things like investments in regulated network assets is working kind of in harmony with investments in kind of unregulated assets, be that generation, be that storage, be that retrofit programs. And kind of create a connectivity between those activities, all behind a shared vision and shared kind of objective. So some of the work that Catapult had done previously identified what is kind of defined as these sort of key steps in a local area energy planning, of bringing a kind of a series of stakeholders together, collaboratively exploring what the system is today and what it might be in the future, producing a plan and defining a series of kind of implementable initiatives and projects, and from that monitoring and reviewing, checking progress, and ultimately setting the direction for the next iteration of the plan. That concept of local area energy planning we see very much as part of a wider kind of requirement, a series of things that we feel need to happen to decarbonise our buildings, and forms part of a piece of work that Billy's been sort of closely involved in around the sort of 6 steps to decarbonise our buildings. And it forms one of those sort of important foundational blocks for helping us decarbonise. But it certainly is one of those things that has to be seen in tandem with a range of other both policy and market initiatives if we're going to be successful and we're going to deliver on the objectives kind of defined in any local area energy plan. What we've found has been a real challenge historically has been the absence of a structured and repeatable framework for producing a kind of whole system plan in a local area. And we've lots of activities been undertaken in a relatively disparate or very different way in terms of its approach to thinking about what a local energy system is. There's been different levels of access to data and information, which has led to very different approaches. And that lack of kind of structure and consistency has led to the process has generally been relatively inefficient, quite often not being data and evidence driven, but also not being very consistent. And then that creating challenges for how you think about how do all these plans kind of collectively add up to a net zero energy system for the UK as a whole. So part of the work that we've done is thought about how you might create a kind of structured a repeatable process for local area energy planning, how that can help you understand the different options and choices in a whole system context for different local areas, how it can support and facilitate a collaborative development of an evidence-based plan, and then how that data and plan can be used to target, as I said before, specific innovation and deployment projects in different places. Now, the Catapult over the last few years has worked kind of collaboratively with a number of organisations in a number of different areas and governments to pilot this process of local area energy planning. Initially as part of the Smart Systems and Heat programme with a particular focus on decarbonisation of heat, but now increasingly more widely thinking about the integration of transport and kind of other challenges that the process could potentially help with. And we worked in 3 different areas, in Bridgend, in Newcastle and Greater Manchester, very much to kind of pilot the kind of concept and understand how it might work, what the challenge is, what the issues are in working and bringing together different stakeholders around a shared plan, what are the issues around ownership and connectivity with the established planning processes for the spatial and housing development, what are the gaps in the policy and regulatory environment that this kind of can't currently connect into, and that's provide us a rich sort of source of kind of insight and evidence into how a process might work in the future going forward. And also it helps us to kind of explore and understand a little bit as well how, if you develop a plan and you get an understanding of kind of what the kind of preferred and cost optimal kind of configuration of technologies and infrastructure in a place is, how do you then ultimately use that information to translate it into kind of meaningful and actionable activity that adds up to net zero? And this slide kind of illustrates some work that we did with Bridgend as part of the pilot, which was to think about how you might define areas of infrastructure zoning within a place, in terms of areas that you might look to build new district heating infrastructure, areas that you might look to electrify or hybridize, areas that you might look to repurpose the existing gas infrastructure. But then at the next layer below that, thinking about, well, how using that data and intelligence might you then target, neighborhood level, street level, community level solutions? How might you develop kind of projects and initiatives that can help to decarbonize a particular place within a place, as it were, and creating a very rich set of data and information that could be accessed by a range of organizations in terms of thinking about how they might engage and participate in delivering smarter local energy systems within different places. And sort of building off that kind of pilot work. So, I mean, just before I move on, I mean, for me, this example, which is Bridgend in Wales, is a really great example of where there was a pilot process for developing a plan. That pilot process in itself has brought stakeholders together. It's helped to develop relationships and thinking about what might need to happen. And from that plan, there is now a number of live projects and initiatives, the development of a kind of low carbon district heating network, a number of initiatives around the development and testing of hybrid heating solutions for different housing archetypes and different households, looking at the potential skills needs and the skills opportunities for industry in the local area. So the plan has very much acted as a catalyst for a range of activity kind of within Bridgend, which we think again is one of those potential key parts. The development of a kind of integrated, joined-up plan between, or across different actors in a place can be really valuable in doing. And sort of triggered by that sort of pilot work that the Catapult did, we have worked very closely over the last year with Ofgem, thinking about, well, what might be a method for local area energy planning done well, and what might be the kind of requirements that help to guide and form the development of a local area energy plan to ensure that there is a degree of consistency, to also ensure that the evidence that are produced can be suitably interpreted. It can be kind of effectively, it can be transparent, easily understood, and effectively used by a range of actors, including the regulator and network operators, in how they make their cases for investment in different infrastructure going forward. And that work defined 4 key elements of what constitutes a local area energy plan done well. The first of those, as I said, is the production of this robust technical evidence that's produced using analytical techniques and considers the whole energy system within a place, and uses kind of available data and uses that in a way that's consistent and transparent. A comprehensive assessment of the wider non-technical factors which are actually critical to change. So not just a techno-economic exercise, but actually the other factors associated with achieving change and achieving buy-in of communities and people and businesses within a place to deliver that change. Related to that, a really well-designed and involving social process which engages the range of stakeholders effectively and uses the technical evidence appropriately to help manage vested interests and lead to kind of a shared plan and direction of travel that many different actors and organisations can get behind. And finally, a kind of credible and sustained approach to governance and delivery of local area energy plans across the country. So a mechanism by which they can be supported and enabled, and we can ensure that there's a kind of balance of activity across the country that supports different areas and recognises the challenges that many places are facing and likely to continue to face in the context of the pandemic, but also how the development of a kind of shared plan for net zero in a place could actually act as a catalyst for a green recovery as we look to move kind of beyond and hopefully out past the pandemic. It could well provide the foundation to move quickly and effectively into a net zero future. And I think finally that is the last slide, I think, from me. So I don't know if Duncan has joined or been able to join us yet, but that was just a bit of a whistle-stop tour, I think, of the work that Catapult's done on local area energy planning. So I don't know if Duncan's with us. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Yes, I am. Sorry about my internet going pear-shaped at a critical moment. Richard, thank you so much for that. I will try and pick up where I didn't leave off. That was fascinating and will be recorded and available to people to catch up with at a later date. So first of all, I'd like to thank Richard and Tim and Vili at the Energy Systems Catapult for agreeing to look at the importance of community energy and cooperating in this event. And we are pleased to welcome 60 of our members, including 2 groups who've already volunteered to pilot local area energy planning with their local authority with community energy at its heart. So we hope we'll be able to see an iteration of that. So we've already had lots of great information from Energy Systems Catapult, and the next stage is a quick round of quick clarification questions, if there are any, and then moving on to small group discussion in 4 or 5 groups, and I'll go over the questions in a second. Our aim is to look at the benefits, the opportunities, the challenges, the barriers, and how to overcome them, and who should deliver what in order for community energy to play a core role in local energy planning. Energy Systems Catapult will be taking notes in 3 of the breakout rooms, and Community Energy England will try and fill in the gaps. We have got the questions on a shared document, which is bit.ly/capital LAEP lowercase notes, and the questions are there, and also links to shared note-taking documents for each group in case people want to collaborate on taking your own notes as you go along, which would be incredibly useful for us to collate later. Thank you. So we will then come back to a plenary where the groups will feed back for 3 minutes max, and we'll identify next steps for stakeholders to take forward, and then a general discussion if there's time, and then the Zoom will stay live for 1 hour after the meeting in case anyone wants to carry on the discussion. Please, as you're discussing in your small groups, appoint somebody to take enough notes to be able to feed back cogently for 3 minutes at the end. it would be useful also to use hand signals so that we don't end up with great gaps and people talking over each other. And the usual one is that I'd like to speak. Two fingers means I have something that would materially change the course of the conversation, a piece of vital correction or information, in which case I will jump the queue. And if you don't get noticed by your chairperson, please stick a hand up in the Zoom facilities, which you can do by clicking on participants. We will endeavour to come to you in order. So the questions that we would like to treat are: what are the benefits first and opportunities of community energy participating in local area energy planning? And I think it would be great to start with the bigger picture. What are the societal benefits and climate benefits, and then to come down to what are the local and community benefits. And opportunities may be a separate thing to look at. Question 2, what are the challenges or barriers that community energy to community energy participating in local area energy planning? Again, start large, go down to the nitty-gritty of working with partners and so on. Question 3, what would need to be in place to overcome the challenges and realize the opportunities? And who needs to deliver what, and then actions to take after this meeting to move things forward. And then we'll move to a plenary at about 4:30, quick report backs, identifying follow-up actions and next steps and other discussion. So without further ado, let's see if there are any clarifying questions, and then move to the small groups. And there will be one Energy Systems Catapult person in 3 of the groups, and it will be up to us to take really good notes to supplement theirs in the others. Any clarifying questions? Mary, you're on mute.
I'm a bit confused about who this is actually done with, because everybody seems to be asked to join in with this at a later date. It's like, oh, this is for reference for DNOs, and this is for reference to these people and that people. I'm not quite clear exactly who this work is done with in the first place, and I think that's kind of a bit of a problem with a lot of these things, that it's kind of handed to on a plate to people who need to be filling in with it in the first place. I don't know what your process you've used for that.
So I guess that's kind of part of the purpose of kind of this kind of session to some extent as well, is that the work that the Catapult's done has been piloting a process and developing a kind of way of thinking about that, and what it has found is the need, I guess, to think about that kind of engagement activity and who needs to be involved, how does that need to be structured. So hence kind of this session. I guess there's a key kind of question around, or one of the key questions for the kind of the role of a local area energy plan is the question of the scale that it is most effective and appropriate, and how it is used by different actors. So obviously one of the key actors is network operators in deciding what infrastructure investments they're going to make for the next decade or many decades. But there is also a wide range of different actors kind of coming about and coming together. So part of this, I guess, the idea of developing the process is to figure out who has to be part of that, and how do we ensure that is providing value at the right time and in the right way to different actors over a decade.
Yeah, but in your pilots, who's been involved in your pilots?
So the pilots was the local authority as the primary kind of convener, the heat network, gas network, and electricity distribution network operators. They plus a variety of kind of second stage of downstream engagement, but the primary focus for key stakeholders was bringing together the local authority, central government, and the different network kind of operators of infrastructure, and in a couple of cases it expanded into including things like major generation asset owners and investors that were active within those local areas. And in those instances, they were the first time that those 4 actors had been in the room together working collaboratively, which for me kind of emphasises the kind of size of the challenge that we have, that the gas network operator, the electricity network operator, the heat network operator and the local council hadn't actually been in the room talking about the future of their energy system ever before, back in 2015. And that is kind of, I think, was one of the catalysts for the reason we think local energy planning is so important, because if even that dialogue between those 4 organisations isn't happening, then there's some major challenges and hurdles we've got to overcome.
Thank you. Any other clarifying questions?
Duncan, there are some in the chat column.
Ah.
Yeah, there's a few there. Duncan, do you want to field those and let me know which ones to pick up, and
I've only just seen them, so if you've seen them and have any responses,
yeah, I'm happy to kind of. I'll try and go through. I don't want to derail your sort of working groups, but the first one I've got there is about how BEIS are using the kind of work. So obviously BEIS was kind of one of the funders and supporters of the initial kind of pilot work, and we are actively engaged in dialogue with them about how a kind of process of scaling up local area energy planning might work. I think it's fair to say that there's quite a lot of challenge from BEIS around how this could effectively be made to work, and the levels of responsibility and the capability and capacity within local areas to actually lead and deliver a more sophisticated whole system planning process. But it's certainly something that we're in kind of discussions with them, and we think there is a way of kind of overcoming some of the barriers and issues that they potentially see from a national perspective. One of our asks to government is we think they need to support kind of local areas in regard capacity and capability issues rather than kind of look for ways around it. But that's obviously one of many asks into government, I no doubt at the moment. See any others? What level is it expected the coordination will take place, regional, city and local? I think that from the work we've done, we've seen the interrelationship between national, regional and local as really important, and actually what we need is a framework of national policy, strategy and direction, then beneath that a framework for kind of thinking about regions, and then underneath that a framework for thinking about local areas in more detail and specificity. What we found is you have to get that balance of detail kind of right, and if you stay at the kind of higher level, you just don't get into the realities of what needs to happen where and when. So you kind of almost need a framework that connects up across those layers, and ideally those obviously should be aligned and connected. I think there's some practical questions about dropping out there, kind of Duncan, which I'll leave to you. Best scale, I mean, the work that we've done today has been at a local authority scale. I think there's an argument that you need a degree of flex in terms of the kind of governance and the kind of wider alignment to other kind of established planning processes and disciplines, and how can you ensure that the process itself is complementary and utilises outputs from other established transport planning, spatial and housing planning development processes. But that is very much a live question about what is the right scale for developing a local energy plan. I think the experience with local authority level is that it has benefits in terms of those synergies, but equally there are challenges. Working at a higher level, we found there are issues when you do start to just look at a regional level and you aren't able to connect with a place more specifically. So it's very, very much a live question, I think, there. A question there about local areas committing to zero carbon targets, and are they operations or are they the area? I guess in this context, when we're talking about net zero targets, we're thinking about their commitments for their area and all the associated emissions with that area, rather than just their operations. Obviously, different authorities have different approaches to some extent in thinking about their operational business emissions targets and those wider emissions. And again, that's a reason we think that a structured and repeatable framework for local energy planning might help with defining those targets and objectives and ensuring things add up to net zero. Oh, there's quite a few here, Duncan, sorry.
Richard, do you want me to answer Saeed's question about MHCLG?
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
The latest, yeah, because Saeed, hi. We've responded to the future, the planning for the future document, which not surprisingly, maybe didn't have very much about energy in it at all. But we've asked, we are trying to strengthen those relationships with MHCLG.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. I think on the case of, is there an example of an LAP that has been agreed and or delivered? I mean, through the pilot work, we did a kind of series of pilots and had a variety of kind of different experiences with the pilot projects. The work that we did in Bridgend, there is now there's a kind of a plan that the Bridgend and Welsh Government both kind of endorsed, although it was a pilot project, so there are kind of limitations to some extent with that plan, but it is very much part of a journey now where there is a series of kind of downstream projects. So there is now an LAP, beyond LAP project. There is a series of kind of initiatives around innovation and deployment that are happening, and have been catalysed by that plan. So that's probably one good example. But I think very much the process we've been on is very much a kind of innovation, kind of R&D activity to figure out how. So what we really see now is we've got some definition of what should happen, and now we need the supporting mechanisms to help places kind of take that forward. Question about using complex data to aid participation in the development of the LAP. I think there's probably a kind of number of examples around that, but I think some of it, one of the interesting things we found is just bringing together data and making it available and accessible is something that has been historically very, very difficult, and actually can just be really helpful for a number of reasons. So even without the complexity, just bringing data and information into a central place that people can access and use. And there's a range of different opportunities we see for how that data then might be used to engage. One of the concepts that we're currently working on is a concept called Consultation 2.0, which relates to how you might create a plan that can actually get people's engagement more effectively, so they can actually access their plan, maybe provide information about their household, what they do, what they see, the issues that they have in their home energy and their mobility, and then using that information to kind of seed and inform the development of a kind of collaborative plan. And digital technology might provide a mechanism for doing that as well. Good question about how is LAP different to the old way of doing things. Well, the old way of doing things was probably gas network operators define a plan of what they're going to do, go and do it. Electricity network operators define a plan of what they're going to do, go and do it. Local authority says it wants to do something slightly different from the other two completely. Other organisations decide they want to do something completely, maybe different in place. And then a wrapper of kind of policy incentives that try to drive in a particular direction. And certainly you would have lots of conflict between the solutions, and they wouldn't be complementary. So you'd have over deployment of certain technologies in certain areas. You'd have technologies that weren't complementary being deployed in particular areas. So the intent is that you develop more system level solutions that work in harmony, and that ultimately they deliver emissions reduction. We've got lots of examples of where activity that was intended to reduce emissions actually hasn't. So what it's trying to do is also support and kind of avoid that. Pilot projects.
I think we should probably move to the discussions now, Richard. I just have one thing I wanted to confirm. I know that the Manchester pilot report mentioned the various Manchester community energy groups, but as far as I could tell from the report, they weren't sort of actively engaged in the LEP. Is that fair?
They were, I think they were part of the kind of extended stakeholder groups. They were part of the kind of consulted kind of wider community in terms of the development of the pilot project. So there is a live project kind of going forward at the moment with Greater Manchester to look at how the scaling of local energy planning across the entirety of the area, because it was an activity that was focused very much on Bury so just one district within Greater Manchester. But they weren't a kind of primary stakeholder, the kind of community energy groups. They were kind of an informed and aware rather than kind of actively involved, which and as much, I think that was probably a function of the design of the project and the nature of its kind of development as kind of anything else.
Great, thank you. Well, we hope we can convince you that community energy is a trick that shouldn't be missed. So I'll just quickly restate the questions, and then if John can move us into the groups, we will send a reminder to the groups about every 15 minutes that now might be a time to move to the next one, but there's nothing sacred about that. If you need to move earlier or you are really chewing useful fat, please be your own timekeepers. So the questions are about benefits and opportunities of community energy being at the core of local area energy planning, the challenges and barriers to participating, and what needs to be in place to overcome the challenges, realize the opportunities, who needs to deliver, and any actions that we can take to move this forward. Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. If my group was anything to go by, really interesting discussions and evidence of so much experience and track record there. So we've got just under 20 minutes to sort of pull some strands together. Obviously, notes will have been taken and we will feed those back. So could we start with a maximum of 3 minutes, nearer 2 if possible, feedback from group 1?
Hi, I can give the feedback. Sorry, I just lost you then. So is it just we're giving a review of our answers to the questions?
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. So for question 1, we sort of responded with community energy is people like us. It's made up of the community. Community engagement needs to be discussed as a how, not just a sort of a what. It's an active process, and bringing the community along in the energy process is vital. It brings a sense of ownership to local energy planning. Community has greater participants, investors, and not just consumers. And then for question 2, we responded with resources in local authorities and a lack of market drivers are barriers to participation. A coalition of the willing could unlock a huge amount of resources. This includes data sharing. Data is vital from a lobbying perspective and to see the state of play, and also getting that data in the first place is important. And for question 3, we got that the skills gap needs to be filled as well as the gap in the supply chain. Effective lobbying is also an action that would need to be taken as bottom-up pressure is required. The recognition of the co-benefits of projects such as retrofit are very important, and also it's vital to get all stakeholders together to reach these goals.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, it falls to me to do group 2. The discussion was incredibly wide-ranging, so I ask my colleagues to chip in when I miss things out. Benefits, the greening of the local economy from local supply, local solutions. Community energy knows the area and can help with supplying acceptable solutions. Linking up energy to social and housing planning, really important. Increasing the sort of social impact of projects that arise out of it. Especially focusing on reducing demand and demand side stuff. Lots of local expertise, which is cheaper than PwC. Levering social responsibility in participating organizations. Green capitalism is the future. Increasing resilience, that's obviously more about localization, but acting as a convener, which has happened in Cornwall and is happening all over the country around zero carbon targets with councils. Better solutions, more buy-in and more education and awareness raising, synergies among opportunities, early visible projects to increase social acceptability of the transformation, increased community benefit arising. I've already mentioned that one. In challenges, funding and resources, fundamentally, community energy, lots of it is had burnout trying to just do stuff over recent years. We need more diverse stakeholders involved, the Environment Agency, Geological Society to roll out ground source, include stakeholders that don't want to be in the transition, for example, oil, danger of big corporates undercutting local operators, as BP seems to be trying to do. We need to be able to pilot some smaller area, local area energy plans, and the challenges of harnessing local authorities and local enterprise partnerships. What would need to be in place? Money for community energy groups, not just to do the planning, but also to do the projects that arise. So we need central government support to make business cases for those. Person at the local authority level to catalyse and champion this. Education in the local authorities, mostly they don't know about energy. Local data, local transport needs, support networks for community energy like Community Energy South, and the government to set targets as they do for housing. So actions to take, a round table to engage with those other stakeholders, intensely local statistics to be reinstated by the Office of National Statistics, getting community energy into the model and into the methodology, a pilot. We've got a number of suggestions where targets, both government and central and local government, community level resourcing for upskilling, and for community energy to be involved in retrofit.
Well done.
Next, please. I'm exhausted. Group 3.
Yeah, I'll do this, and then if anyone else in the group wants to chip in, I won't repeat everything that the previous groups have said, other than to say that, yeah, similar sort of conversations around local authorities, education being absolutely key. Engagement was another big area of topics. So how do we do that? Are the skills or the experiences from others that we can kind of learn from each other to make sure that it's done in the right way? That we have the right frameworks in place, because obviously skills and knowledge varies very much across the country. And I think the only additional thing really to add is around fairness. So how does community energy help to create those frameworks to ensure that it is fair, that it's just? What do we mean by that? And how are we ensuring that the kind of rights and needs of consumers and individuals are addressed, as well as those for communities, and how we kind of raise awareness of where they don't always match. Actually, do they often do. So if you really dig into cost versus what is actually needed in a local area, if you ask an individual, it's often about cost, but actually if you go into that, explore that in more detail, it's not actually about cost, it's about kind of what's most effective. And then, yeah, I'm not sure that this was explicitly said, but I think it implicitly was that we think that there should be a pilot with the community energy, at least one pilot with community energy at the core of it. We did talk about the importance of having more pilots, really, to ensure that those right frameworks are in place and that things are done properly. Because as great as it is doing things at a local level, we need to make sure that there's that minimum level there of who's engaged, how they're engaged, how the processes are done, how the systems work, and so on. Richard Halsey was in my group, so I don't know if Richard's got anything to add from Energy Systems Catapult.
Thanks, Emma. No, I think that was a kind of a good summary of the key things that we've covered. I think the issue of kind of connectivity with people and communities was something that obviously came out. And how do we explore how that might actually happen, and how do we ensure that the process that comes about can leverage kind of the range of experience, knowledge, and also recognise the differences in kind of knowledge and kind of expertise across different areas. I think was something I certainly took away from the discussion. But yeah, it's good summary, Emma. Thanks. Back to you, Duncan, I think.
Yeah. So could we have feedback from group 4? How many groups did we actually have in the end, John?
It was 5.
So group 4 next, please.
Side here. I think I was in group 4. John, I think that was right.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay. So benefits and opportunities. So clearly there'll be a bit of an overlap for what people have mentioned, but I'll try and add some new things. One, we are in an energy transition, and a part of that, we also know we need greater decentralization and democratization in that process, which is widely acknowledged by the government and private sector, as well as the civil sector. And so community energy brings that to the debate in a more meaningful way. The participation of community energy groups also allows for a more granular bottom-up process in terms of determining where the new infrastructure needs to be, where those assets needs to be placed, and by involving the community to make sure that they feel that they are very much a part of the process. And also, quite rightly, I think somebody mentioned an awful lot of the innovation is happening from the demand side. It's happening from the bottom up, and that isn't necessarily taken into account by an awful lot of the government, and other larger organizations don't necessarily take that sufficiently into account. In terms of question 2, challenges and barriers, one, has been gone over quite substantially already. Resources for groups. When you're volunteer-led, and an awful lot of these issues are highly technical in nature and quite long and drawn out, without any kind of resourcing for groups from local government or central government, the absence of a community energy strategy and any of the outputs that came out of that, there's just not the wherewithal to engage to the level that's needed. Also, again, I think also touched upon the failure in some instances, in many instances, I'm afraid, of local authorities to engage with community energy groups. There are a host of reasons for that. More often than not, because local authorities are so stretched. They've had a decade of austerity. Many don't even have some of the officers in the energy and climate teams to actually engage on many of these issues with DNOs and other private sector companies, never mind community energy groups. But also a nuance of that is government sets the tone for local authorities, and there really isn't that push on local energy from central government to local authorities. And if you're a local authority officer, you have plenty of things to keep you occupied on as part of your primary statutory duties. Energy and climate isn't one. And just to mention, BEIS have the will, as somebody's mentioned, in terms of implementing some of these issues that we've talked about on local area energy planning, but they don't always have the way because the strings of control are in MHCLG and in Treasury. And just very quickly, what would be needed to overcome the challenges? One central thing that came over quite strongly was lobbying. So lobbying at the local authority, MP and national government level. I gave a perspective of what we've done in London, in that even though we have 73 MPs in London, and of course have central government based here, we've actually gone through the Mayor of London and been quite successful in persuading the Mayor at the regional level to support community energy. There was an issue that came up very interestingly about the hubs, the energy hubs, as part of the LEPs, and the way in which they've set out strategies rather than plans, and the ability or absence of ability to community energy groups to interact with those hubs. And finally, Mary, I think, voiced a lot of people's frustration in saying the regulatory barriers have been there, they continue to be there, they don't seem to be going away anytime soon. And there's an element of just Groundhog Day going round and round and trying to overcome some of those challenges. I think I will stop there.
Thanks, Syed. And whoever can feedback quickly from group 5, and then we will gather all together to set down some actions.
Yeah, that would be me. So in our group, in terms of the opportunities, we looked at it two ways. One of them is for the community energy groups to local authorities. Some of the opportunities we discussed around actually highlighting what's happening in the local areas and getting that engagement with local authorities around local energy planning is something that could be quite helpful. Another aspect we discussed is to focus on co-benefits and bringing a perspective which goes beyond energy as part of the process. Again, some of these things were mentioned, but bringing knowledge, which is local knowledge, directly to the authorities rather than needing to go through consultancy process was another thing that was highlighted. In terms of what local energy planning can offer communities, couple of the things we discussed around clarity of projects and potentially allowing kind of view of what might be developed in an area. Again, highlighting what areas projects can just kind of get on with, or what can just be done if there is a plan in place. Yeah, the other thing we talked about was around local energy plans working as a kind of gravity point for local authorities. If they're endorsed, then it would make it easier probably to get kind of partners engaged in projects and so on and so forth. In terms of challenges, some of the things were already mentioned. Lack of resources, one of them, both in local authorities and community energy groups. The other thing that was interesting point we discussed was around multiple local authority officers and the fact that there might be different kind of departments that people engage with or get to some officers but not others. So if there was a process to help streamline that would be quite helpful. And then another point we discussed about DNOs and how it would also be helpful if they were made to share best practices amongst themselves and kind of bring forward some of the learnings they're gathering from across the country. And finally, in terms of actions, we kind of discussed higher level rather than practical actions, I suppose. Some of the things were highlighted was having the right words in the right places in the coming energy strategy, having more clarity around shared responsibilities, accountability, discussing whether and how communities can act as catalysts to drive some of those actors together, which don't always talk to each other. And then our kind of final point was around local plans being made. Local plans are currently a statutory duty, and that question around whether local energy planning should also be made one so that it can become some part of the framework. Yes, I think that's where I'll stop unless I missed something.
Thank you very much, Philly. Okay, we are right up against it with strictly 2 minutes to go. So what I would love us to do is to agree a few next steps that we can take forward out of this meeting. And we already have agreement with Energy Systems Catapult to meet to discuss doing a roundtable with wider stakeholders. But anything we should add to that? A pilot was mentioned, so getting some kind of agreement to explore that with willing community energy groups would be, I think, an important next step. Any more? Please just unmute and add if you want to.
I think there's got to be a link back to a regulatory side of things, because otherwise it's just not going to happen. And like the investment side of things, to me, the most important thing is to develop like a framework, but I think people have to then develop it in a way appropriate for their area.
So how would we move the regulatory thing on, apart from including Ofgem in the stakeholder group and challenging them on that?
Well, it's Ofgem, but I think it's also challenging BEIS around things like planning rules, you know, to enable things like heat networks more easily. So there's an investment case for them. If they're serious about it, they're going to have to answer some hard questions in that sort of area.
Okay, well, maybe we should explore that offline. Any other things that we can move forward immediately? What about...
So Duncan, I wonder whether there's also, I'm thinking about COP26, where the UK is going to be holding the Conference of the Parties for Climate Change next year. Isn't there an opportunity to encourage, shame our government into doing something, maybe the pilot, the exemplar project, or whatever it might be, is the sort of the idea that gets the thinking juices going, and the minister will hang on to this if it's feasible, and would want to deliver it if they get all the praises and slaps on the back to demonstrate utility.
Good idea, thank you. That's something that we'll talk to Energy Systems Catapult, who have direct lines to government about. That would be a good lever, I think.
We could also do with the local targets bit. So we have a UK-wide target for net zero, but it'd be useful if we then started Committee on Climate Change or central government started breaking it down to regions and local authority areas.
Yes, I might get back to you on that, Charmian. Thank you.
Duncan, I think I'm guessing CEE are responding to the planning white paper.
We have done, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, an awful lot of the really good work CEE have done is been through with BEIS, and you have good routes through BEIS. But as I think our group highlighted to me, even though BEIS often has the will, an awful lot of the tools around what we're talking about here in terms of supplementary planning guidance or planning papers or any other kind of guidance that's issued on planning sits wholly within MHCLG. I'm old enough to remember in 2008, we had all these discussions around climate change planning. And in 2010, a really authoritative climate change planning document was issued. But then the coalition government came in, and Eric Pickles, who's then Secretary of State, got rid of all the planning guidance that had taken several years to put together. So unfortunately, we're going round a full loop again, as is often the case. But just to mention, it's MHCLG where some kind of focus needs to be directed to.
Thank you, yes.
I was going to suggest it may be worth talking to somebody like the Sustainable Energy Association, because their routes, they sometimes take a different route in terms of lobbying. And so this might be a good thing for CE. And so, for instance, they're putting a bill through the House of Lords and through Parliament at the moment around getting homes to EPC Band C. So you might find that there's techniques and routes and contacts that they've used that would be useful here too.
Thank you. Yes, that's a good idea.
So can I make a small contribution here?
Please.
I find it a little bit upsetting that we are still trying to separate community energy from everything else, rather than trying to make it as a picture which is, without it the piece is incomplete. And I don't know why do we need to do lobbying and be against somebody. I think everybody, the companies, the community, everybody needs to work together. We don't have the luxury to be against anything. So the idea is I think more to seek collaboration and cooperation to demonstrate the value. And I've missed quite a lot of discussion, unfortunately, due to school run, and I might be just missing it, but where is the picture of the innovation routes that are based in community energy? That's what I see often, the first movers, the great ideas, the real pain points. That's what we need to be putting forward, knowing that this is coming from community and they are addressing it in such ways, like, for example, like this. And this is what we can contribute to the whole planning and transition, rather than more kind of, and we disagree with you and try to do it other ways than you are doing. And I'm sorry if I'm being silly in a way, but I think it's just a picture of community energy as a necessary piece is a key point that to me is obvious, because there are parts where participation of a company as a provider of an energy service, or participation of some kind of a government project or something like that is not viable because of a number of areas, geographic distribution, density of population, whatever you say, you know. And so just picking out and showing exactly what is the value of community energy is that we live there, we have to look after ourselves because in some cases nobody else will, and we know how to do that. And sorry if I'm talking too much.
No, I think that's a really good point, that we need to be collegiate. We are continuing to make the argument to central government that they can't do it without people and communities, as the Committee on Climate Change has made clear. But we need to be a broken record, and we need it to come from many quarters. So harness your MPs to say that loud and clear in ministers' ears, and we might get some change, because it's an attritional process. So that's where the lobbying has to come in. But I agree with you that we will win on the benefits we can bring, and we've listed hundreds of them today, and that will add to our argument. We already have a good sort of foundational document on benefits of community energy, but we need to make it richer and more visible and exampled. Yeah, I think that's going to be our strongest suit. I think we need to wrap up now. Please remember, if you have later thoughts, you can add them as an appendix to your group's notes via the bit.ly link we circulated earlier, bit.ly/capital LAEP lowercase notes, and you'll see a link to your collected notes. So please do continue, as thoughts occur to you, to contribute them. We will be collating this into a document, and Energy Systems Catapult have doubtless taken their own notes, so that we will have a case to be arguing for community energy to be at the center of the localization of energy for the benefit of the community. I just end by thanking everybody for being here. We will circulate you with the notes when they're prepared, probably by the end of the week, and I hope to re-engage with good news when we move towards the stakeholder, the round table, hopefully later in the year. Thank you, everybody. If you want to stay on to carry on the chat or just chew fat, please feel free to do so. We'll be in touch. And again, thank you to the Energy Systems Catapult for both collaborating and being here today. Good night.
Duncan, on behalf of the Energy Systems Catapult, can I say thank you to everybody as well?
Thank you. Thanks, Tim. Yeah, speak soon for our next meeting.
Well, thanks, Duncan. Thanks, everybody.